If you've spent any time in the anime community, you've probably heard this criticism before. One Piece has bad villains. Maybe they're too goofy, maybe they aren't intimidating enough, maybe they lose too quickly, maybe they just aren't on the level of villains like Aizen, Madara or Meruem. And at first glance, that criticism sounds reasonable, but I think it's based on one fundamental misunderstanding. Because Eiichiro Oda, i.e. aka Oda Sensei, isn't trying to write the coolest villain in anime. He's trying to write villains you'll still be thinking about years after you finish the arc. And once you realize that, almost every major antagonist in One Piece starts making a lot more sense. One Piece villain rarely exist simply to be physical obstacles for Luffy to punch. They are ideas. Every major antagonist represents a belief that directly opposes Luffy's understanding of freedom. That's why comparing them purely on intimidation or edginess misses the point. Let's take Crocodile. On the surface, is just a powerful pirate trying to overthrow a desert kingdom, but underneath that, Crocodile believes trust is a weakness. He believes alliances are temporary, friendship is naive, and everyone eventually betrays everyone. That's why Baroque works uses number instead of names. Nobody knows each other, nobody trusts each other. The organization itself reflects Crocodile's cynical worldview. Now compare that to the Straw Hats, they're chaotic, emotional, constantly arguing, yet they would risk their lives for each other without hesitation. The conflict in Alabasta isn't just physical, it's philosophical. Luffy doesn't defeat Crocodile simply because he's stronger, he defeats the cynical belief that people can never truly trust one another. This pattern repeats itself throughout the entire series. Every great villain tests a different part of Luffy's worldview. Enel believes he is literally above humanity. Luffy defeats a self-proclaimed god with the most ridiculous earthly power imaginable, rubber. Moria believes people should avoid pain by letting zombies fight for him. Luffy believes hardship makes people stronger. Doflamingo believes the power gives the strong the inherent right to shape reality and control the weak. Luffy believes freedom belongs to everyone regardless of strength. And then there's Katakuri. Katakuri believes that absolute, untouchable perfection is the only way to protect his family. He hides his true self because vulnerability is dangerous. Luffy, on the other hand, embraces his flaw and relies completely on his crew to cover his weakness. By the end of that fight, Katakuri doesn't just lose physically, he yields in philosophy. Luffy's philosophy actually frees Katakuri from the prison of his own perfection. Luffy's philosophy actually frees Katakuri from the prison of his own perfectionism. These fights are never just about who punches harder, they're argument. Every battle asks which philosophy deserves to survive. One of Oda's greatest strengths as a writer is that very few of his villains exist in isolation. They aren't just evil for the sake of being evil, they are created by the exact same broken world they are now helping to maintain. Doflamingo is a product of celestial dragon privilege and the violent hatred of the common people toward them. Arlong is a victim of systemic racism who allowed this trauma to turn him into an oppressor. Big Mom is the tragic result of childhood abandonment and manipulation. Even Akainu isn't driven by cartoonish greed. He is driven by uncompromising, terrifying belief that absolute justice justifies any sacrifice. He will murder innocent civilians if there is even a 1% chance a scholar is hiding among them, because in his mind, protecting the system is worth the blood. None of that excuses what these villains do, but it explains why they became who they are, because real people rarely believe they are evil. They believe they are right or justified. That's what separates memorable villains from forgettable ones. Oda isn't interested in creating monsters, he's interested in showing how ordinary belief can become monstrous when taken to the extremes. So if the writing is this deep, why do some fans still think the villains are weak? I think there are three main reasons. First, Oda isn't afraid to make villains look ridiculous. Big Mom sings, Queen dance, Caesar is a coward, Baggy continually fails upwards. But comedy doesn't erase danger. In fact, One Piece often uses humor to lower your guard right before reminding you exactly how terrifying some villains really are. For example, Big Mom's musical numbers are fun right up until she rips a man's soul out of his chest. Second, One Piece isn't trying to create fear through its villains, it's trying to create hope through its heroes. That is a fundamentally different storytelling philosophy than almost any other battle shonen. Third, and perhaps the biggest reason, is that fans compare every new villain to the best ones. Not every antagonist needs to redefine the series. Some exist to challenge a specific character, reveal a piece of the world, or move the story toward its next stage. But if there is one villain who perfectly represents everything Oda wants to say about antagonists, it's Blackbeard. Because Blackbeard isn't simply evil, he is Luffy's dark reflection. They meet over cherry pie in Mocktown. They have the exact same taste, but completely opposite reactions. One loves it, one hates it. Yet moments later, Blackbeard is the only person who validates Luffy's ideology, screaming that a man's dream will never die. Both dream big, both believe in destiny, both inspire incredible loyal followers, both refuse to quit. The difference is how they pursue freedom. Luffy believes the freedom is a right that shouldn't come at the cost of innocent lives. Blackbeard believes the freedom belongs only to whoever is strong enough to take it, no matter who gets crushed in the process. They are chasing the exact same mountain, just climbing it from opposite sides. That's what makes Blackbeard so terrifying. He's not Luffy's opposition, he is what Luffy would become if he lacked empathy. Empathy is the version of Luffy who believes the dream matters more than the people you hurt along the way. So, does One Piece have a villain problem? I don't think so. I think we have an expectation problem. We expect every villain to be charismatic edgelord, looking at you, Luffy, to look incredibly cool and dominate every scene they're in. But Oda is aiming for something different. His villains don't just challenge the protagonist's fist, they challenge the story's central ideas: freedom, justice, dream, power, and hope. And that's why, even decades later, people still fiercely debate characters like Crocodile, Doflamingo, Akainu, and Blackbeard, because they aren't simply obstacles waiting to be punched. They are philosophies given human form. Maybe, just maybe, that's why One Piece villains continue to spark debate years after they are defeated. Because once the fight is over, the real question isn't whether Luffy won, it's whether the idea that villain represented still exists in our world. And in One Piece, that is far more interesting than simply being evil. The end.